Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the English Coffee Talk Show.
Welcome! So glad you're here with us today. I'm James.
And I'm Eva, and this is the show where we chat, we laugh, we tell stories, and most importantly, we help you practice your English in a natural, relaxed way. So whether you're listening on your commute, during a lunch break, or maybe sitting by a window with your own coffee like James was this morning,
Highly recommended, by the way.
highly recommended. We are so happy you're here. Today's episode is a really special one because we're talking about one of my absolute favorite cities in the entire United States, Boston.
Boston! Such a great city. And specifically, we're going to be talking about its historic landmarks and its beautiful, incredibly unique architecture. This is a perfect topic for English learners because we'll be introducing some really rich vocabulary words that describe buildings, streets, and the way cities look and feel.
Exactly. So if you're someone who loves to travel or who wants to talk about cities and neighborhoods in English, today's episode is going to give you so much great language to work with. And we'll be sharing some personal stories too, some real memories from our own visits to Boston.
Yeah, and fair warning, Eva's story gets a little bit adventurous.
It does, but we'll get to that. First, let's talk about Boston itself and some of the vocabulary you'll need to really understand and describe it. James, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Okay, so one of the first things that strikes you when you walk around Boston, especially in neighborhoods like Beacon Hill or the South End, is all of these beautiful brownstones. And that's our first vocabulary word, brownstone. A brownstone is a type of building, usually a townhouse or residence, that is built from a dark reddish brown stone. The word actually refers both to the material and to the style of building. So you can say a brownstone building or just a brownstone as a noun, like, I walk past a row of gorgeous brownstones on my way to the park.
Right, and brownstones are everywhere in Boston. They line entire streets, and they're incredibly photogenic. When you look at them all together in a row, they have this warm, earthy, reddish tone that just feels historic. Like the city has a story to tell just from looking at the buildings.
Totally. And speaking of looking at buildings, another great word to know is facade. Facade. The facade of a building is the front face of it. It's the exterior, the outside wall that faces the street. So when you're walking down a street and admiring a beautiful old building, what you're actually looking at is its facade. You might say, the facade was covered in intricate stone carvings, or they restored the original facade of the building.
I love that. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, buildings absolutely have faces. Some of them look friendly, some of them look a little intimidating. Okay, another word I want to bring up is cobblestone. Cobblestone refers to the small, rounded stones that were used to pave streets in older cities. And Boston has a lot of streets that still have their original cobblestone paving. It gives the whole area this incredible old world feeling.
Exactly. And that's connected to another word, colonial. When we describe Boston's architecture as colonial, we mean it dates back to or is styled after the colonial period of American history, which is roughly the 16s and 1700s. Colonial buildings tend to be simple, symmetrical, and made from brick or wood. They have a very classic, austere look. Austere means plain and serious, no unnecessary decoration.
Right. And Boston has more genuine colonial architecture than almost any other American city. It's one of the oldest cities in the country, so a lot of these buildings have been standing for over 300 years. Which brings us to another important word, preservation. Preservation means the act of keeping something safe and in good condition over time, especially something historically valuable. And here's a great idiom that fits perfectly here. Stand the test of time. This means to remain valuable, strong, or relevant even after a long period of time has passed. So you could say Boston's colonial architecture has truly stood the test of time. What a gorgeous phrase, right? Stand the test of time. It pictures something being tested, challenged by years and decades and centuries, and surviving.
Okay, so we have brownstone, facade, cobblestone, colonial, and preservation. Those are your architecture words for today. Now, Eva, it's story time. Tell us about the North End.
Okay, so this story happened a few years ago. I was visiting Boston for a long weekend, and on my second day there, I decided I wanted to explore the North End. For anyone who doesn't know, the North End is Boston's oldest residential neighborhood. It's also sometimes called Boston's Little Italy because of its large Italian-American community and all of its Italian restaurants, bakeries, and cafes.
Oh, yeah, the North End is incredible.
It really is. So I started at the waterfront and just started walking with no real plan. I had my phone, but I had deliberately put it in my bag. I wanted to just wander, just see where the streets took me. And the North End is perfect for that because the streets are incredibly narrow and winding. They don't follow a grid like modern cities do. They follow old paths that people and horses walked hundreds of years ago. Exactly. So after maybe 20 minutes of walking and turning again, I had absolutely no idea where I was. I was lost. But here's the thing, it didn't feel scary. It felt wonderful because everywhere I looked, there was something beautiful. The buildings were old red brick, some with their original facades still completely intact. The brick had this warm, almost orange-red color that changed depending on the light. Some of the walls had little window boxes with flowers, bright red geraniums, yellow marigolds. It was like walking through a painting. Okay, so I'm wandering through the neighborhood, taking in all these beautiful brick facades and narrow little streets with their cobblestone pavement underfoot. And then I turn a corner and I see this alleyway. It was tucked between two old brick row houses, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. There was an archway at the entrance, a beautiful old stone archway with a wooden sign hanging from it that looked like it had been there for at least a century. The wood was dark and weathered. I couldn't quite read the name on it, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go in. So I walked through the archway, and it was like entering a different world. Exactly like stepping back in time. The alleyway was completely cobblestoned, every inch of the ground, these small, rounded stones laid in a slightly irregular pattern, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The walls on either side were old brick masonry, 3 or 4 stories high, so the alley was shaded and cool, even though it was a warm day. There were iron lanterns mounted on the walls, not modern electric ones. These were old-style gas lanterns with wrought iron fittings. They were unlit at that time of day, but I imagined at night they would cast this soft golden glow. It was, and I was just standing there, kind of frozen in awe, when I noticed an older gentleman sitting on a small wooden stool near one of the doorways. He was maybe in his 70s, with white hair, wearing a light gray cardigan, even in the warm weather. He had a small cup of espresso resting on the windowsill next to him, and he was reading a newspaper. Very old school, very charming. I must have looked like a tourist, which I was, because he looked up at me and smiled. I did. I apologized for disturbing his reading, and he waved his hand and said, "No, sit," and he gestured to this low stone step nearby. So I sat, and we started chatting. His name was Aldo. He'd lived in the North End his whole life. He was born in that very neighborhood, in a building just around the corner. His parents were Italian immigrants who came to Boston in the 1940s. He told me that during the neighborhood's heyday in the mid-20th century, the alley would be strung with lights and everyone would gather there for summer festivals. Tables would come out, families would cook, there'd be music, children running. He said it with this look in his eyes that was part joy and part sadness, the kind of look someone gets when they love a memory. I sat with Aldo for about half an hour, just listening to his stories. He talked about preservation efforts in the neighborhood, how people had fought to keep the old buildings standing, to protect the character of the streets. He was proud of that. Before I left, he pointed up to the top of the building at the end of the alley and said, "See that? That's the original cupola." And I looked up, and there it was, this small round dome right at the peak of the roofline, painted white, slightly weathered, catching the afternoon sun. It was perfect.
Ava, I loved that story so much. This is actually a perfect example of what we call a hidden gem, and that is an idiom I want to explain for our listeners. A hidden gem is something, a place, a person, a thing, that is extremely special and valuable, but not widely known or famous. It's hidden because not everyone knows about it, and it's a gem because it's precious, like a jewel. So that alleyway in the North End, that was a hidden gem. You could say, we stumbled upon a hidden gem tucked behind the main street. It wasn't on any tourist map, but it was one of the most memorable parts of Ava's whole trip. Couldn't agree more. Okay, my turn. I want to talk about my visit to Beacon Hill and the Old North Church. These are two separate places, but they're both deeply connected to Boston's colonial history. And visiting them on the same day was honestly one of the most emotionally moving experiences I've had as a traveler.
Oh, I'm ready for this. Tell me everything.
Okay, so let me set the scene. It was early October, maybe 8 in the morning. The air was cold and crisp, that very specific autumn cold that feels fresh and clean rather than harsh. The sky was a pale gray blue. I had a coffee in hand, naturally, and they started at the bottom of Beacon Hill and just began walking up. Then I went to the Old North Church, and I have to say, I'm not a particularly religious person, but walking into that building gave me this profound sense of stillness and gravity. The Old North Church, officially called Christ Church, is the oldest surviving church building in Boston. It was built in 1723, and it's most famous for the role it played in the American Revolution. You might have heard the phrase, one if by land, two if by sea. That refers to the night of April 18, 1775, when two lanterns were hung in the steeple of this church to signal that British troops were crossing the Charles River. That signal helped Paul Revere warn the American colonists that the British were coming.
And when I think about your story and my story together, I think the thing that connects them is this feeling of connection. Connection to the past, connection to the people who lived in these places before us. Whether it's Aldo in his alleyway sharing stories about the neighborhood's long history, or you standing in a church where history actually happened, Boston gives you that. It gives you that feeling of being part of something much larger than yourself.
That's beautifully put. And I think that's why architecture matters. It's not just about how buildings look, it's about what they hold, the stories, the memories, the history embedded in every brick and cobblestone and wrought iron railing. The built environment is a record of human life, and cities like Boston, with all their careful preservation, are keeping that record intact.
Okay, I love that. And on that note, let's move into our key takeaway section because I know our listeners are going to want to make sure they've really got those vocabulary words locked in before we go.
Key takeaways time. So we're going to recap 5 words and phrases from today. Ava and I will each take turns. We'll say the word, give you a clear, simple definition, and use it in a sentence. Ready?
Ready. Okay, number 1, brownstone. A brownstone is a building, usually a house or townhouse, made from or faced with dark reddish brown stone. It's also used as a noun to describe the building itself. Example sentence, we rented a beautiful brownstone apartment in the heart of the city.
Number 2, facade. The facade of a building is its front face, the exterior wall that faces the street. It's the first thing you see when you approach a building. Example sentence, the historic hotel had a stunning facade decorated with carved stone details. Remember, the word facade can also be used figuratively in English. If someone has a facade, it means they are showing a false front, pretending to be different from how they really feel. But in architecture, it simply means the front face of a building.
Great extra note, James. Number 3, cobblestone. Cobblestone refers to small, rounded stones used to pave streets and paths in older cities and towns. Walking on cobblestone has a very distinct look and feel. Example sentence, the cobblestone streets of the old quarter were slippery after the rain, but absolutely gorgeous.
Number 4, preservation. Preservation is the act of keeping something in its original state, protecting it from damage, destruction, or change. Historic preservation specifically refers to protecting buildings, neighborhoods, and artifacts that have historical significance. Example sentence, thanks to years of careful preservation, the original colonial church still stands exactly as it was built in the 18th century.
And number 5, our idiom of the day, hidden gem. A hidden gem is something wonderful and special that is not widely known. It could be a place, a restaurant, a book, anything that deserves more attention than it gets. Example sentence. That little bookshop on the side street is a real hidden gem. Most tourists walk right past it, but it's filled with incredible rare books. So next time you discover something wonderful that not many people know about, call it a hidden gem.
Perfect. So to recap our 5 key takeaways: brownstone, facade, cobblestone, preservation, and hidden gem. Say those words out loud if you can. Repeat them a few times. Think about how you could use them in a conversation. The best way to learn vocabulary is to actually use it. So try describing a building in your own city using some of these words this week.
Absolutely. All right, I think that brings us to the end of today's episode of the English Coffee Talk Show. Eva, as always, this was such a joy. Okay, to all of our wonderful listeners, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. We genuinely love making this show for you, and we hope it's helping you feel more comfortable and confident with your English every single episode.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love it if you could take just 1 minute to subscribe to the English Coffee Talk Show. It's completely free, and it means you'll never miss a new episode. And if you're on a platform that allows reviews, even a quick one-line review makes a huge difference for us. It helps more English learners around the world find the show.
And don't forget to turn on your notifications so you get an alert the moment a new episode drops. We release a new one every week, and we always have something fun planned. Speaking of which, next week, we're going somewhere with a lot of history and even more amazing food. That's all we're going to say for now. You'll just have to tune in and find out.
Very mysterious, Eva. Very mysterious. We'll see you next week, everyone. Until then, keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep enjoying your coffee.
Take care, everyone. Bye for now.